stop breaking yourself.
Silence your inner critic. Start living. The cruelest person in your life lives inside your head. He knows all your fears, every weak spot, every shame you've buried, and he talks to you every single day, not out loud. But his voice is the one that decides whether you try or quit before you start. Whether you step forward or hide in the back, whether you start living or keep putting life on hold. Today, that voice goes silent, not because you'll become stronger, but because you'll finally understand who he is and why he's been lying to you all along. Introduction. You're not broken. Why you're okay even when there's constant noise inside. You think something's wrong with you because the voice in your head won't shut up. It tells you you're not good enough, you'll fail, don't even try. And you believe it, not because it's true, but because it sounds like you. So you think, this is who I am, this is my truth. I'm just being realistic. But here's what nobody told you: that voice, it's not you, it never was, it's a recording. An echo, a protection mechanism gone rogue, and you've been listening to it like it's gospel. For years, maybe decades, letting it decide what you can do, what you deserve, who you're allowed to become. But here's the truth: you're not broken, you're just hijacked by a voice that was built to protect you, but ended up imprisoning you. And the moment you see that, everything changes, not because the voice disappears, but because you stop obeying it. You stop believing that every critical thought is a fact. You stop letting fear masquerade as wisdom. You stop shrinking to make that voice feel safe. This book isn't about positive thinking. It's not about affirmations. It's not about loving yourself more. This book is about something deeper: understanding the voice, seeing it for what it is, and taking back control so you can finally stop fighting yourself and start living. Not someday, not when you're ready. No. Because you've been ready all along. You just couldn't hear yourself over the noise. So let's silence the critic and let you, the real you, finally speak. Chapter 1. The voice that pretends to be you. If this voice belonged to another person, you would have stopped talking to them years ago. You know the voice, the one that shows up right before you try something new. You're not ready. What if you fail? People will laugh at you. It sounds reasonable, protective even, like it's trying to save you from embarrassment, from pain, from failure. But here's what it's actually doing: it's keeping you small, keeping you safe, keeping you stuck. And you think it's you. You think that's just how I think, but it's not. Because if that voice belonged to someone else, if your best friend talked to you the way you talk to yourself, you'd cut them off immediately. So why do you let it stay? Why do you listen? Why do you obey? Because you don't realize it's not you. 1. How the inner critic is formed. The inner critic wasn't born with you. It was built, piece by piece, word by word, experience by experience. It started early. Maybe when a parent said, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Maybe when a teacher said you're not trying hard enough. Maybe when you failed at something and someone laughed. Or maybe no one said anything at all, but you felt it. The disappointment, the judgment, the unspoken message you're not enough. And your brain, your brilliant, survival-oriented brain, took that message and internalized it. It created a voice that would warn you, protect you, keep you from ever feeling that pain again. So it started whispering, "Don't try that. You'll fail. Don't speak up. They'll judge you. Stay small. Stay safe." And at first, it worked. You avoided rejection. You avoided failure. You avoided pain. But you also avoided living. Because that voice didn't just protect you from danger. It protected you from everything. From risk, from growth, from opportunity, from life itself. And now, years later, that voice is still running the same program, even though the danger is long gone. Even though you're not that scared kid anymore, the voice stayed. And it sounds like you, but it's not. It's an outdated defense mechanism that's holding you hostage. 2. Why you think these are your thoughts. Here's the tricky part: the voice uses your inner monologue. It doesn't sound foreign. It doesn't sound like someone else. It sounds like you, same tone, same vocabulary, same mental voice, so of course you believe it. When it says I'm not good enough, you think that's your honest assessment. When it says I'll probably fail, you think that's realistic thinking. When it says I should just stay where I am, you think that's wisdom. But it's not. It's fear wearing the mask of reason. And because it sounds like you never question it. You never ask, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this even mine? You just accept it and act accordingly, which means you've been living your life based on thoughts that aren't even yours. Thoughts planted by fear, by shame, by past pain, not by truth. And here's what's wild: you would never let someone else talk to you this way. If a stranger walked up and said you're not smart enough to do that, you'd ignore them. If a coworker said you're going to embarrass yourself, you'd call her. But when the voice in your head says it, you listen. Because you think it's you, but it's not. It's the critic. And it's time to stop giving it your voice. 3. The biggest lie: he wants to help you. The inner critic will tell you it's on your side. I'm just being realistic. I'm protecting you. I'm keeping you from getting hurt. And part of you believes it, because sometimes it does keep you from pain. When it says don't apply for that job, you'll just get rejected, and you don't apply, you avoid rejection. When it says don't speak up, you'll look stupid, and you stay quiet, you avoid judgment. So the critic looks like it's helping. But here's the truth: the critic isn't protecting you from pain. It's protecting you from life, because life involves risk. Life involves failure. Life involves being seen. And the critic can't handle that, so it convinces you that playing small is smart, that staying hidden is safe, that never trying is wise. And you believe it, because it frames itself as your ally. But it's not. It's a prison guard disguised as a friend. And the worst part, you've been thanking it. Every time you listen, you're reinforcing its power. Every time you obey, you're proving it right. Every time you shrink, you're giving it more control. And it will never tell you, okay, you're safe now, go live. Never, because its job isn't to help you thrive. Its job is to keep you safe. And safe means never changing, never growing, never stepping outside the familiar. So it will keep you small forever if you let it. And the only way to stop it is to see it for what it is: not your protector, not your friend, not your truth, just a voice. A scared, outdated, overprotective voice that's been running your life without your permission. And now you're taking that permission back. Chapter 2: Why the Critic Actually Exists. The inner critic isn't your enemy. He's the guard of your past, terrified of your future. The critic isn't evil. It's not trying to ruin your life. It's trying to save it. But here's the problem: it's using an outdated playbook. A survival guide written when you were 5 years old, and it never got the update. So it still thinks failure, death, rejection, abandonment, being seen, danger. And it reacts accordingly. Every time you try something new, the critic panics. Because new, unknown, an unknown threat. So it screams, stop. Don't, you'll get hurt. Not because it's mean, but because it's scared. And it thinks if it can just keep you from trying, it can keep you from pain. But what it doesn't realize is that it's causing a different kind of pain. The pain of regret, the pain of never knowing, the pain of living a life that never felt like yours, because you were too afraid to claim it. 1. Fear of pain, not drive for growth. The inner critic operates on one principle: avoid pain at all costs. Not help you grow, not support your dreams, not encourage you to become who you're meant to be. Just avoid pain. And to the critic, pain means anything uncomfortable. Rejection, failure, embarrassment, uncertainty, change. So it will do everything in its power to keep you away from those things, even if those things are exactly what you need to grow. Because the critic doesn't care about growth, it cares about safety. And growth is terrifying. Growth means stepping into the unknown. Growth means risking failure. Growth means being seen before you're perfect. And the critic can't handle that, so it keeps you where you are, in the job you hate, in the relationship that drains you, in the life that feels too small, not because that's what's best for you, but because it's familiar. And familiar safe, even if familiar is slowly killing you. Because to the critic, slow death is better than sudden pain. So it keeps you stuck, telling you it's not that bad. At least it's stable, better safe than sorry, and you believe it. Because you think it's wisdom, but it's not. It's fear. Fear pretending to be practical. Fear pretending to be cautious. Fear pretending to be smart. But it's just fear, and fear doesn't help you grow. It helps you survive. But surviving isn't living, and if you keep listening to the critic, you'll survive your whole life without ever actually living it. 2. Why it activates right before important steps. Ever notice the critic is loudest right before something important, right before you hit send on that email, right before you walk into that room, right before you make that decision? Suddenly the voice is screaming. Wait, think about this. What if it goes wrong and you freeze? Because the noise is so loud, you can't think straight. You can't feel your intuition. You can't access your courage. All you hear is danger, danger, danger. And you think maybe this is a sign. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I should wait. But here's what's actually happening. The critic is doing its job. Its job is to keep you from changing, from taking risks, from stepping into the unknown. And important moments, they're all about change, new opportunities, big decisions, significant growth. And the critic sees that as a threat. So it activates, full force, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something new, and new danger to the critic. But here's the truth. The cloudness of the critic isn't a warning. It's a signal. A signal that you're about to do something that matters, something that could change your life, something that scares the old version of you, something that the real you has been waiting for. So the next time the critic gets loud before something important, don't see it as a stop sign. See it as confirmation that you're on the right path. 2. How childhood experience controls adult life. Your inner critic wasn't formed yesterday. It was formed years ago, when you were a kid, when your brain was still figuring out how the world works. What's safe? What's dangerous? And it took notes, detailed notes. Every time you got hurt, emotionally or physically, your brain logged it. This situation pain, this action rejection, this behavior punishment. And then it created rules. Rules to keep you safe. Don't speak up. Class time you did. You got yelled at. Don't try new things. Class time you did. You failed and people left. Don't ask for what you want. Last time you did. You were told no. And those rules, they made sense when you were 7, when you were small, when you were powerless, when you actually did need protection. But now, you're not 7 anymore. You're an adult, with agency, with resources, with the ability to handle rejection, failure, and disappointment. But the critic doesn't know that. Because it never updated its software. It's still running the same program from 20, 30, 40 years ago, still protecting you from dangers that no longer exist, still warning you about threats that aren't real anymore. So when you think about speaking up in a meeting, the critic remembers the time you spoke up in class and got shut down. Asking someone out, the critic remembers the time you liked someone and they rejected you. Starting your own business, the critic remembers the time you tried something and it didn't work out. And it panics, because to the critic, you're still that scared kid, and it thinks if it doesn't stop you, you'll get hurt again. But here's the truth. You're not that kid anymore. You're capable of handling pain. You're capable of surviving rejection. You're capable of failing and getting back up. But the critic doesn't see that. It only sees the past. And until you show it that you're no longer that fragile child, it will keep treating you like one. And the only way to show it is to act, despite the fear, despite the warning, despite the noise. Because action is the language the critic understands. And every time you act, despite the fear, you're teaching it, I'm okay. I can handle this. I'm not that scared kid anymore. And slowly, the grip loosens, the voice gets quieter, and you start to realize you were never as fragile as the critic made you believe. You were just never given the chance to prove it, until now. Chapter 3: How the critic steals your life without you noticing. He doesn't forbid you to live. He just convinces you to wait. The critic is sneaky. It doesn't slam doors in your face. It doesn't lock you in a room. It doesn't shout, you can't do that. It whispers, not yet. Wait until you're ready. Maybe next time. And you think that's reasonable. So you wait. You wait to start the business until you have more experience. You wait to have the conversation until the timing is right. You wait to go after what you want until you feel more confident. And the critic, not smart, very smart. But here's what it doesn't tell you: there's never a perfect time. You'll never feel 100 ready. The timing will never be right. So you keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And one day you wake up and realize you've been waiting your whole life. 3. 1. Postponed dreams and steps never taken. Think about it. How many things have you put off until you're ready? How many dreams have you postponed until the timing is better? How many steps have you not taken because the critic said not yet? 1, 5, 100? And here's the brutal truth: most of those things you were ready for. You just didn't feel ready because the critic will never let you feel ready. That's not its job. Its job is to keep you safe. And safe means never trying, so it creates impossible standards. You can start the business once you have $50, zero saved. You can ask for the promotion once you've mastered everything. You can put yourself out there once you're 100 confident, and you believe it. So you work toward those standards. You save money, you learn skills, you try to build confidence. But by the time you get there, the critic has moved the goalposts. Actually, you should wait until you have $100, zero. Actually, you should get one more certification. Actually, maybe wait until next year. And you keep chasing, but you never arrive because ready is a feeling the critic will never let you have. So your dreams stay dreams, your steps stay unwalked. Your life stays unlived, not because you're incapable, but because you've been waiting for permission you'll never get. From a voice that has no interest in you living fully, only in you staying safe, and safe looks a lot like stuck. 3. 2. Why you're constantly not ready yet. You've heard it 1,000 times: I'm just not ready yet. And you mean it. You genuinely feel not ready. But here's the secret: not ready isn't a state of being. It's a state of mind, and the critic controls that state. It can make you feel unprepared, even when you're over-prepared. It can make you feel unqualified, even when you're over-qualified. It can make you feel uncertain, even when you know exactly what to do. How? By focusing on what you don't have, by magnifying what could go wrong, by convincing you that there's one more thing you need before you're allowed to start. And you believe it because it feels true. You think, once I have X, then I'll be ready. But here's what actually happens: you get X. And the critic says, okay, but now you need Y. You get Y. And the critic says, actually, you also need Z. You get Z. And the critic says, maybe you should reconsider the whole thing. And you realize you'll never feel ready, because ready isn't about having enough. It's about trusting yourself, and the critic will never let you do that. So you stay in preparation mode forever, learning, planning, researching, but never doing. Because doing means risking, and the critic can't handle risk. So it keeps you in the almost stage, almost ready, almost confident, almost starting, but never actually there. And the years pass, and you look back and realize you've been not ready for 10 years. And all that time, you actually were ready. You just didn't believe it, because the critic wouldn't let you. 3. The cost of one concession to the inner voice. Here's what happens. Every time you listen to the critic, you reinforce it. Every time you say, you're right, I'll wait, the critic gets stronger. Every time you say, you're right, I'm not ready, the critic gains more control. Every time you shrink to make the voice feel comfortable, you lose a piece of yourself. And you think it's just one time. It's not a big deal. I'll do it later. But it is a big deal. Because one concession becomes 2, 2 becomes 10, 10 becomes a pattern. And before you know it, you've handed over your entire life to a voice that was never supposed to be in charge. And the cost? It's not just the dream you didn't chase. It's not just the step you didn't take. It's the accumulation of 1,000 small surrenders. Surrendering your voice in the conversation, surrendering your ambition in the career, surrendering your desires in the relationship, surrendering yourself in the life you're living, until one day you wake up and realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. Because the person you've become is the person the critic wanted you to be. Small, safe, silent, and you think, how did I get here? But you know how. One concession at a time, one I'll wait, one I'm not ready, one maybe later, and now later has become never, and you're left with regret. Not because you tried and failed, but because you never tried at all. And that's the real cost. Chapter 4. Why Positive Thinking Doesn't Work. You can't outshout a voice if you still believe what it's saying. You've tried positive thinking, you've tried affirmations, you've stood in front of the mirror and said, I am confident, I am capable, I am enough, and for a moment it felt good. But then the critic came back. Louder. Who are you kidding? You don't really believe that. You're just lying to yourself. And suddenly, the affirmations fell hollow, because deep down, you still believed the critic. And that's the problem with positive thinking. It's not that it's wrong. It's that it's surface level. It's like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound and expecting it to heal. 4. 1. The mistake of affirmations. Affirmations sound like this: I am successful, I am worthy, I am strong. And the theory is if you say it enough, you'll believe it. But here's what actually happens. You say I am successful. The critic says no, you're not. Look at your bank account. You say I am worthy. The critic says then why did they reject you? You say I am strong. The critic says you cried yesterday. That's not strong. And the affirmation crumbles. Because it's fighting against a belief that's deeper, a belief that's been there for years, a belief that's rooted in experience, a belief that feels true. And you can't just override that with words. Because the critic doesn't care about your affirmations, it cares about evidence. And if the evidence says you failed before, then the critic will use that to dismantle every positive thought you try to build. So affirmations don't work not because they're bad, but because they're not addressing the real problem. The real problem isn't that you don't say nice things to yourself. The real problem is you believe the mean things, and until you stop believing those, no amount of positive thinking will change anything. 4. 2. Why motivation breaks. You felt motivated before. You've had those moments where you're fired up, where you feel unstoppable, where you think this is it, I'm going to change everything. And for a day or a week or a month you do. You take action, you make progress, you feel alive. But then something happens, a setback, a rejection, a moment of doubt, and the motivation disappears instantly, and you're back where you started. Wondering what happened, why can't I stay motivated? But here's the truth: motivation is an emotion, and emotions are temporary. They come, they go, and if your action depends on feeling motivated, you'll only act when you feel good, which means you'll quit the moment you don't, and the critic knows this. So it waits. It waits for the motivation to fade. It waits for the doubt to creep in. It waits for the perfect moment to whisper, see, I told you it wouldn't last. And you believe it because it feels true. You think I'm just not disciplined enough. I don't have what it takes. Maybe I'm not meant for this, but that's not it. The problem isn't that you lack discipline. The problem is you're relying on motivation instead of commitment. Motivation says I'll do it when I feel like it. Commitment says I'll do it whether I feel like it or not. And commitment doesn't break because it's not based on feelings. It's based on decision. A decision that the critic can't touch because it's not negotiable. 4. 3. The difference between suppression and liberation. There's a difference between silencing the critic and liberating yourself from it. Silencing looks like shut up, I don't want to hear it. Stop talking, and for a moment it works. The voice gets quiet, but then it comes back, louder, because suppression doesn't solve anything. It just pushes the voice down temporarily. And the voice always finds its way back up. Liberation is different. Liberation doesn't fight the voice. It doesn't try to silence it. It doesn't pretend it's not there. Liberation says, I hear you. I understand you're scared, but I'm not listening to you anymore. And that changes everything. Because liberation isn't about getting rid of the critic. It's about taking away its power over you. It's about recognizing this voice has been running the show, but it doesn't have to anymore. Because you are in charge. And the moment you realize that, the critic doesn't disappear, but it stops controlling you. And that's freedom. Chapter 5. How to stop believing every thought. A thought is not a fact, even if it sounds convincing. You think of that because you think something, it must be true. I'm not good enough. Must be true because you thought it. I'll probably fail. Must be true because you thought it. No one wants to hear what I have to say. Must be true because you thought it. But here's the reality: thoughts are not facts. They're just thoughts, mental noise, neural activity, automatic reactions. And most of them are completely meaningless, but you treat them like they're the voice of God, like they're undeniable truth, like they're commands you must obey. And that's the problem, because the moment you believe every thought that crosses your mind, you become a prisoner to your own mental chatter. And the critic thrives in that prison. 5. 1. The skill of distancing from thoughts. Here's the skill that changes everything: learning to observe your thoughts without becoming them. Most people think I am my thoughts. So when the thought appears, I'm not good enough, they think I am not good enough, and they feel all the weight of that belief. But what if, instead of believing the thought, you just noticed it? Oh, there's the thought, I'm not good enough. See the difference? In the first version, you are the thought. In the second version, you're observing the thought. An observation creates distance. Distance creates space. And space creates choice. The choice to say, that's an interesting thought. I don't have to believe that. That's just my ready doing what it does. And suddenly the thought loses its power, not because you fought it, not because you replaced it, but because you stopped treating it like truth. You started treating it like what it is: just a thought. One of thousands that will pass through your mind today, most of them completely irrelevant. And this one, this critical, painful, limiting one, just as irrelevant as the rest. 5. 2. How to observe, not engage. The critic wants you to engage. It throws out a thought: you're going to embarrass yourself. And it waits for you to react, and you do. You think, am I going to embarrass myself? What if I do? Maybe I shouldn't do this. And now you're spiraling because you engaged. You took the bait. You entered the conversation. You started debating with a voice that was never interested in facts. But here's what you can do instead: observe. The thought appears: you're going to embarrass yourself. And instead of engaging, you just notice there's the fear thought. That's it. You don't argue with it. You don't analyze it. You don't try to disprove it. You just acknowledge it. Yep, there it is. And then you move on. You do the thing anyway, not because you convinced yourself it's safe, but because you stopped meeting the thought's permission. And that's power. Because engagement keeps you stuck. Observation sets you free. Engagement says, I have to deal with this thought. Observation says, this thought is just passing through. And when you stop engaging, the critic loses its grip, because it needs your attentions to survive. And when you stop giving it that, it fades, not immediately, but gradually, until one day you realize the voice is still there, but it doesn't control you anymore. 5. 3. The first real relief. The first time you do this, the first time you observe a critical thought without believing it, you feel something you haven't felt in years. Relief, real relief. Not the temporary relief of avoiding something scary, not the fake relief of positive affirmations that don't stick, but actual relief. The relief of realizing, I don't have to believe this, I don't have to obey this, I don't have to let this run my life. And in that moment, everything shifts. Because you've just discovered that the critic's power was never real. It was only real because you believed it was. But now you see it for what it is: a voice, a pattern, a habit, one that you can change, not by fighting it, not by silencing it, but by simply refusing to believe it. And that refusal is the beginning of freedom. Because once you stop believing, the critic loses its authority, and you take yours back. Chapter 6. The new inner voice. You don't need a new voice, you need an honest one. You think you need to replace the critic with a cheerleader. Someone who's always positive, always encouraging, always saying you're amazing, you can do it, you're the best. But that's not what you need, because that voice isn't honest either. And deep down, you know it. So you don't believe it, and it doesn't help. What you actually need is an honest voice. A voice that tells you the truth, not the harsh, distorted truth of the critic. Not the fluffy, fake truth of toxic positivity, but the real truth. The truth that sounds like this is hard, but you can handle it. You might fail, but that's okay. You're scared, and that's normal. That's the voice that actually helps. 6. One support without self-deception. The new inner voice doesn't lie to you. It doesn't say everything will be perfect, because it won't. It doesn't say you'll definitely succeed, because you might not. It doesn't say nothing bad will happen, because something might. But it also doesn't catastrophize. It doesn't say you'll definitely fail. It doesn't say everyone will hate you. It doesn't say you're not capable. Instead, it tells you what's actually true. This is uncertain, and that's okay. You don't know what will happen, and that's normal. You might struggle, but you'll figure it out. And that voice? That voice you can trust, because it's not trying to manipulate you into feeling a certain way. It's just telling you the truth, and the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is more supportive than any lie. 6. How to talk to yourself like an adult. The critic talks to you like you're a child, a fragile, incapable child who can't handle reality, so it either scares you into submission with worst-case scenarios, or coddles you with false reassurance that everything will be fine. Neither approach treats you like an adult, but you are an adult. An adult who can handle hard truths, process difficult emotions, navigate uncertainty. So talk to yourself like one. When something's hard, don't say I can't do this. Say this is hard, but I've done hard things before. When something's scary, don't say I'm going to fail. Say I'm scared, and I'm doing it anyway. When something's uncertain, don't say I need to know how it will turn out. Say I don't know how this will go, and that's okay. That's adult self-talk, honest, grounded, supportive without being delusional. And when you talk to yourself that way, you build trust. Trust that you can handle whatever comes, not because you're invincible, but because you're resilient, and resiliency is what you've always had. You just forgot because the critic kept telling you you were too weak to handle life, but you're not, and it's time to start talking to yourself like you know that. 6. The tone that gives support, not illusions. There's a tone that the new voice uses. It's not harsh, but it's not fake happy either. It's calm, steady, real. It sounds like a good friend who tells you the truth. Not to hurt you, but because they respect you. It sounds like, yeah, this situation sucks, but you'll get through it. Not everything happens for a reason. It sounds like you might not get what you want, but you'll be okay either way. Not just manifest it and it will happen. It sounds like you're scared, and that makes sense. Do it anyway. No, don't be scared. Be confident. See the difference. The new voice doesn't gaslight you into ignoring reality. It acknowledges reality and supports you through it. And that's what you've been missing. Not false optimism, not delusional confidence. Just honest support. The kind that says life is hard and you're capable of handling it. That's the voice you've been needing all along. Chapter 7. The moment the critic loses power. The critic is strong as long as you're listening. He's powerless the moment you act. The critic has one weakness, action, because the critic lives in your head. It thrives in thought, analysis, but the moment you move, the moment you take action, the critic can't keep up, because action is louder than thought, not in volume. In truth, action says I'm doing this regardless of what you think. And the critic? The critic has nothing to say to that, because action is proof. Proof that the critic was wrong, proof that you could do it, proof that you survived despite the fear. And every time you act despite the critic, you weaken its hold. Until one day it's just background noise, still there, but irrelevant. 7. 1 small steps against big fear. You don't need to conquer your fear all at once. You don't need to take a massive leap. You just need to take one small step, one tiny action in the direction of your fear. If you're afraid of public speaking, don't book a TED Talk. Just speak up once in a meeting. If you're afraid of starting a business, don't quit your job tomorrow. Just take one small action toward that goal. If you're afraid of being seen, don't post a manifesto. Just share one honest thought, small, manageable, but still brave, because small steps aren't weak, they're strategic. They prove to your brain I can do this, and once your brain has that proof, the next step gets easier. And the next, until you realize you've walked a lot further than you ever thought possible, not because you stopped being afraid, but because you stopped letting fear decide. 7. 2. Why action is quieter than thought but stronger. Thoughts are loud, they're constant, they're insistent, they demand your attention. What if this? What if that? You're going to fail, and it feels like they're the most important thing. But action is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't justify itself, it doesn't explain itself. It just is. You send the email, you make the call, you show up. No fanfare, no drama, just movement. And in that movement, you realize something: the thoughts were lying. They told you you couldn't do it. But you did. They told you it would be unbearable, but it wasn't. They told you you'd regret it. But you don't. And suddenly the thoughts lose their credibility, because action revealed the truth. The truth that you were always capable. You were just never given the chance to prove it, because you kept listening instead of moving. But now you're moving, and the critic can't keep up. 7. 3. How to take back control. Control doesn't come from controlling your thoughts. You can't control what pops into your head. You can't stop the critic from speaking. But you can control what you do next. You can't control the thought you're not good enough. But you can control whether you believe it, whether you act on it, whether you let it decide what you do today. That's where your power is, not in silencing the voice, but in choosing whether to follow it. And every time you choose not to follow it, you take back a piece of control, a piece of your life, a piece of yourself. And over time, you realize you were never powerless. You just thought you were. Because the critic was so loud, you forgot you had a choice. But you do. You've always had it. And now you're using it. Chapter 8. Life without constant inner war. Silence inside isn't emptiness, it's space. For life, you've been at war with yourself for so long you forgot what peace feels like. You thought peace was weakness, peace was naivety, peace was delusion. But it's not. Peace is clarity. Clarity to hear what actually matters. Clarity to feel what you actually want. Clarity to move without constant second-guessing. And when the inner war ends, you don't become weak. You become unstoppable. Because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're finally moving forward. 8. 1. What a calm mind looks like. A calm mind isn't empty. It's not void of thoughts. It's not blissed out detachment. A calm mind is simply a mind that doesn't believe every thought it has. A mind that observes the critic but doesn't obey it. A mind that feels fear but acts anyway. And when you have that, everything changes. Decisions become easier, not because you're always certain, but because you're no longer paralyzed by doubt. You think, I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to try anyway. And you do. Conversations become lighter, not because you're always confident, but because you're no longer rehearsing disaster in your head. You just show up and say what you actually think. Life becomes simpler, not because challenges disappear, but because you stop creating problems that don't exist. You stop imagining worst-case scenarios. You stop catastrophizing every decision. You just live, one moment at a time, and that's what a calm mind looks like. Not perfect, not free of fear, just free of the constant war. 8. 2. What changes in decisions and relationships. When the critic loses power, your decisions change, not what you decide, but how you decide. Before, every decision felt heavy. What if I'm wrong? What if this is a mistake? What if I regret this? And you'd analyze for days, for weeks, sometimes for years. But now, you decide, not impulsively, but decisively. You gather the information you need, you listen to your gut, you make the call, and you move on. No second guessing, no ruminating, no mental torture, just decision, action, done. And that changes everything. Your relationships change too. Before, you were afraid to be honest, afraid to set boundaries, afraid to say what you actually thought. So you people pleased. You stayed quiet. You made yourself small to keep the peace. But now, you're honest, not brutally honest. Just honest. You say what you mean. You ask for what you need. You walk away from what drains you, and some people don't like it. They preferred the version of you that was easier to control, so they leave. And that's okay, because the people who stay are the ones who actually want to know you, the real you. Not the version that's been performing to avoid the critic's wrath. And those relationships, they're deeper, truer, lighter, because they're built on honesty, not fear. 8. 3. The habit that stays forever. This isn't a one-time fix. The critic doesn't disappear forever. It will come back. In moments of stress, in moments of uncertainty, in moments when you're about to do something that matters, it will speak up. But here's the difference. Now you have a habit. The habit of not believing it. The habit of observing, not obeying. The habit of acting despite the noise. And that habit is yours forever. Once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. You might forget for a moment. You might slip back into old patterns, but you'll catch yourself. You'll notice, oh, I'm listening to the critic again. And you'll choose differently, not perfectly. Not every time, but more and more, until it becomes automatic. Until your default isn't fear, it's action. And that's freedom. Not the absence of the critic, but the presence of choice. The choice to live your life on your terms, despite the noise. And that choice is always yours. Conclusion. You can start today. You don't have to defeat the voice. You just have to stop obeying it. And that's where life begins. You made it, not to the end of the book. To the beginning of your life, the life where you stop fighting yourself. Where you stop waiting for permission from a voice that will never give it. Where you stop believing every critical thought that crosses your mind. This is where it starts. Not when you're ready, not when you're confident, not when the critic is silent. Now, today. In this moment, because the critic will never be silent, but you can stop giving it control. You can stop treating its thoughts like they're facts. You can stop obeying its commands like they're laws. And the moment you do, everything changes, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger, not louder, not more aggressive. Just clearer, clear on what's real and what's just noise. Clear on what's yours and what's just old programming. Clear on who you are beneath all the criticism. And that clarity is power. Power to decide, power to act, power to live, not perfectly, not fearlessly, just honestly, as yourself. The version of you that's been waiting for permission to exist. But you don't need permission. You never did. You just needed to stop asking. Stop listening to the voice that said you weren't ready. And start listening to the part of you that's been ready this whole time. So here's what you do next. You take one step. Not a big one, just one action toward the thing the critic said you couldn't do. Maybe it's sending that email, having that conversation, starting that project. Whatever it is, do it today. Not because you feel ready, not because you're certain, but because you're done waiting for the critic's approval. And as you take that step, notice what happens. Notice that the world doesn't end. Notice that you survive. Notice that the critic was wrong. And then take another step, and another, and another. Not because it's easy, but because it's yours. Your life, your choice, your voice. Not the critic's. And the more you step, the quieter it gets. Not because it stops talking, but because you stop listening. And one day, you'll realize the critic is still there, but it doesn't control you anymore. It's just background noise, and you're living, finally, fully, freely. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, but honestly, as yourself, the version of you that the critic never wanted you to be. But the version you were always meant to be. So stop waiting, stop preparing, stop hesitating, start living today. Because the life you want isn't on the other side of defeating the critic. It's on the other side of ignoring it. and that's something you can do right now. So do it. Take the step, make the move, say the thing, and watch as your life finally becomes yours. The end. What happens next? You close this book, and you make one decision. One small decision that the critic told you not to make, and you do it. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Right now, because that's where freedom lies, not in the absence of fear, but in the presence of action. So act. And let the critic scream. It doesn't matter anymore, because you're not listening. You're living, and that's the only voice that matters now, yours.